FPL Gameweek 27 transfer plans on the FPL Joe YouTube channel. Today we'll be covering everything you need to know for Gameweek 27. Is Semenyo a buy? Is Rice a sell? We'll be covering both of these and looking at all the key transfers for you to consider for your team, plus the impact of the weekend's FA Cup results and draw on the upcoming double and blank game weeks, and answering your questions as we approach the deadline. And of course, all timestamps are in the description if you want to skip to a specific part. Let's start with a quick look at how I'm doing so far in Gameweek 26. So with the final game of the double, Wolves vs Arsenal still yet to play, I'm currently on a red arrow of 40k down to 65k, an incredibly poor game week with just 1 assist and 1 goal from 11 players and no clean sheets. And starting with Munoz, he racked up over 1 XGI in Gameweek 26, a massive amount of attacking threat for a defender, but with his teammates unable to make the most of the chances that he created, Palace went on to concede 3 goals from 0.4 XGC. And with Munoz receiving a yellow card, that meant he came away with a measly 1-pointer this week, and it really went to show Palace's defensive fragility, which was the main concern about going double Palace with Gahey now gone, but fingers crossed for an improvement on this when facing Wolves at home in Gameweek 27. And next up, Enzo. Another 0.8 XGI, adding to last week's 1 XGI, but still with no returns to show for it. It wouldn't be a big issue if not for João Pedro and Palmer returning for fun. Palmer scored 3 penalties in 2 games and even missed an open net in Gameweek 26. Hopefully, Enzo can pull it back in Gameweek 27 at home to Burnley. And then finally, Wirtz. He hit the post in this game, looking bright, but Sunderland were predictably resilient at home. Ultimately, I'm still happy that I have him for the next 5, even if he did blank in this one. And then besides them, Timber had a possible assist denied by Martinelli's single-footedness. Gabriel almost got sent off, although notably for a second yellow, so he would have been suspended for the FA Cup, but back for the Wolves fixture. And lastly, a shout out to Samuel on Twitter, who spotted the Potts red card and gave me the heads up. I wasn't actually aware that anyone was taking notice of my bench, but it did give me a chuckle to see, and thankfully I shouldn't be needing him anytime soon, at least not in the next few games. So with my underperforming team now covered, let's look on to Gameweek 26's big hitters, and starting with Virgil. He pulled off this season's not so rare combination of a clean sheet, a goal, DEFCON and 3 bonus for a 17-pointer. Liverpool's defence have been looking better recently, and really they were due some returns at some point. And for defenders in particular, if they can stack attacking returns with clean sheets, bonus points then come into play, which can be really valuable as we saw here. And next up, Semenyo. Getting a goal, an assist, and 3 bonus points for a 14-pointer in Gameweek 26. The big question is whether you want to buy him for Gameweek 27 if you're a non-owner, as he continues to return and get solid minutes for City, and who with his help are looking much better in attack. But the main caveat is that he's very likely, about 90%, to blank in Gameweek 31, and we'll discuss this potential transfer in more detail in the Q&A. Similarly, another player blanking in Gameweek 31, Strand Larsen. He bagged 2 goals and both were finished well, but notably, there was neither a high quantity or quality of chances created for him. And while we're always impressed by strikers who can finish chances well, as FPL managers we usually prefer options who get better and more frequent chances, as they often outscore in the long run. And then the final blank Gameweek 31 player, O'Reilly. Sold by many, including myself, over minutes worries, but seems to have proven that he can play pretty much anywhere, playing anywhere from left back to midfielder to attacking midfielder. And this certainly helps his minutes, especially without Nori back and contesting for left back. So again, not a buy given the blank game week, but one to watch for Gameweek 32 onwards, especially if City do get multiple doubles before the end of the season. And then lastly, Cole Palmer. Another goal and assist in Gameweek 26. That adds to his hat-trick in Gameweek 25, a massive 32 points for owners across the last 2. He's the best captaincy option in Gameweek 27, but not a player I'd be buying unless I have multiple free transfers to burn, as he's got a very tough run of fixtures from Gameweeks 28 to 31. But if you do own him already, you could be in for a massive haul in Gameweek 27. And with that in mind, let's now look forward to the upcoming game week. Today, I'll be answering a couple of your key questions for Gameweek 27, and starting off, we've got a great set of 3 questions from Paul Pogbeast. Fantastic name, and let's take these one by one. Firstly, a big question for many this week, is it worth considering Semenyo despite the upcoming blank? And my answer is that it's entirely team dependent, but rather than just saying it, let's have a look at why. So looking at my team now, I've got 1 free transfer, and if we move all the way forwards to blank game week 31, it tops me up to exactly 5 free transfers. So firstly, I'll move all of my blanking players to the bench, meaning Raya, Gabriel, Lacroix, and Haaland. And then I need to look at which players I need to transfer out, and that's going to be made up of extra blanking players who don't fit on the bench, or dead spots, or non-playing players. And in my team, there are 4. Timber and Munoz, my 2 blanking players, and Potts and Guiu, my 2 dead spots. So we'll need 4 transfers to fix those, and just as an example, we can move Timber to Anderson, Munoz to Hill, Potts to Dango, and Guiu to Raul. And that leaves us with 1 free transfer, allowing for either 1 covered injury between now and Gameweek 31, or a luxury transfer. But let's see what would happen if I brought in Semenyo in Game Week 27. We'll start by moving Mbeumo to Semenyo. It doesn't really matter who you transfer out, but we're assuming here that the player you're transferring out would have played in Game Week 31. If you've got an injury like Bruno G or another blanking player, that's slightly better, and I'll explain why shortly. But for now, back to blank Game Week 31. So the same subs as before, Raya, Gabriel, Lacroix and Haaland, but this time we've got 5 players who need transferring out, and 1 fewer transfers to do that, because we've used one bringing Semenyo in Game Week 27. So if we do the same, Timber to Anderson, Munoz to Hill, Potts to Dango, and Guiu to Raul, this time we'll also need to move Semenyo to Jada, which will take my team to a -4 hit, which is very hard to justify for a 4-week punt. And that's because you effectively need 2 transfers to bring in Semenyo, 1 to bring him in, and then 1 to take him out. So now to answer the question, should you buy Semenyo in Game Week 27? Well, if you've got multiple free transfers already built up, or at present you've got fewer than 3 required transfers in blank Game Week 31, then yes, he is an option. And also, if you're transferring out an injured player, such as Bruno G, or a blanking player such as João Gomez, that's only 1 transfer added, not 2, as you're not increasing the number of blanking or non-playing players in your squad by bringing Semenyo in. However, if none of those apply to you, and I suspect for many that is the case, no, I wouldn't be recommending transferring Semenyo in newly for Game Week 27, but he's a great hold if you do already own him. And the other reason is that there are already great options who you could be considering as an alternative, who you don't need to transfer out in blank Game Week 31. And that leads on nicely to the next question. So let's jump back to Game Week 27 and undo the Semenyo transfer. The next question is a 3-4-3 viable, or should we go sideways and do Ekitike to Thiago and then a mid to Wirtz? And what we're considering here is that we do want Liverpool attacking coverage, and alongside Salah, Wirtz and Ekitike are the main 2 options at a similar price point to each other. Szoboszlai is of course an option too, but with significantly lower attacking threat and also no longer on pens with Salah back. So in my opinion, both a 3-4-3 and a 3-5-2 are viable options going forwards, and to see why, here's my list of midfielders and forwards to buy for Game Week 27, and notably, these are just ordered by team, not by how important they are to bring in, but the options to consider here are Bruno, Mbeumo, Wirtz, Salah, Jada, Dango, Rodgers, Ekitike and Thiago. And I'd say that with any combination of these attackers, you can't really go wrong, so it depends on where the money is for your team now. If you're keen to get Thiago, which I'd say is a good call, and you don't have the luxury transfers to upgrade a dead spot forward like Guiu or Krupi Jr., then a sideways move of Ekitike to Thiago is a fair way to do it. Upgrading a midfielder to Wirtz is also a solid option for Liverpool attacking coverage, especially if, like with my team, you've no easy route to get to Ekitike. But the one point that I would say is that the better budget players are found in midfield, with the likes of Dango, Dewsbury Hall, Anderson of Forest, and Garner all great choices, with different risk profiles below the 6 million mark. Krupi Jr. and Mane are the only 2 budget forward options realistically, but Krupi's place in the starting 11 is not a lock at the moment, and Mane's an avoid as he blanks in Game Week 31 anyway. And closer to 6 million, we do have Raul and Calvert-Lewin, but both are lacking certainty of minutes currently. So ultimately, your best 8th attacker is likely going to be a midfielder, and that's if you've got the budget and transfers to get to 8 playing midfielders and forwards. And on the subject of transfers, the final question of the 3 is how many transfers should we try to carry to the blank, or through wildcard in Game Week 32? And to answer, let's have a quick look at the upcoming fixtures. We'll be looking at the impact of the latest FA Cup results and draws shortly, but for now, just looking at the overall fixture run, the guidance from me will be fairly simple. If you're not on wildcard 32, save as many transfers as you possibly can, and 5 is going to be the target to aim for, while still doing what you can to get to 11 starters for blank Game Week 31. And if you are on wildcard 32, there's no major pressure to roll any through, again, as long as you can get to 11 starters for blank Game Week 31. Ultimately, free transfers are always a bonus to have for dealing with uncertainty, so don't waste them making sideways moves just for the sake of it. And how many we'll likely want will depend on who actually blanks in Game Week 34 and who actually doubles in Game Weeks 33 and 36. So to best prepare for that uncertainty, it's not a bad idea to carry 1 to 2 extra free transfers through blank Game Week 31 if you have the luxury of doing so. And now on to the next question from Will. Could this team be worth bench boosting? And this is going to be a really common question in the next few weeks, as many will likely have 1 or 2 game weeks where they've got 4 easy or home fixtures in the coming weeks. But whether you should pull the trigger depends on a few things. Firstly, if you've already used your wildcard, you can use it fairly comfortably, either now or at any point later in the season. That's because regardless of how many teams double in Game Week 33, it's unlikely you'll have enough transfers to reach 15 doubling players anyway, so using it in a game week where you've got 4 good fixtures and fit players is a fine call. However, if you've still got your wildcard and are planning to use it in Game Week 32, save your bench boost for double Game Week 33. and that's amplified by the FA Cup 5th round draw, which happened yesterday evening. We've got Fulham versus Southampton, Port Vale or Bristol City versus Sunderland, Newcastle versus Manchester City, Leeds versus Norwich, Mansfield Town versus Arsenal, Wolves versus Liverpool, Wrexham versus Chelsea, and West Ham versus Brentford. So why does this matter? Well, looking at this graphic produced by FPL Spaceman, as a result of the fixtures falling in this way, which is that in the next round of the Cup, we've only got a few Premier League teams playing each other, we see the chance of FA Cup semi-final and Premier League clashes increase, and that means FA Cup semi-finals involving Premier League clubs clashing with those teams' Premier League fixtures in Gameweek 34, and the only real big hitter fixture, which is where we'd expect a strong Premier League team to be forced out, is Newcastle versus Man City. And in that case, if City do win, which they'll be predicted to do so, Newcastle could still double in Gameweek 33 regardless, if Arsenal make it to the semi-finals, as it's Arsenal versus Newcastle, which would be the Gameweek 34 fixture that would be clashing. And it is worth mentioning that this is looking at clashes, not guaranteed blanks, and it's possible that these fixtures could be moved to the midweek in Gameweek 34 rather than to a different game week, assuming the midweek is free, which it will be for any fixture where neither team is in European competitions. So what that means for us is that the chance of the maximum 4 clashes has sharply risen, up from approximately 46 on Saturday, that was before many of the ties were played, to approximately 67% now. And for FPL managers, that means a greater number of potential doubles in Gameweek 33. So if you're on wildcard 32, it's because you're lining up for an up to 15 player bench boost the following week in double Gameweek 33. And while it's possible that you could outscore a team of 4 doubling bench players in a single game week, the chance of that happening is significantly lower. And then the final question, is Rice a sell to fund more explosive midfielders? Which, especially after Arsenal's double game week finishes, is going to be a really common theme. Rice has underperformed against many comparable midfielders in the past 6 game weeks, and he's set to blank in game week 31. But it's not just him. There are loads of other DEFCON midfielders who many will already own or will be considering buying. And with so many great midfield options, making those 5 spots very valuable, we have to ask, should we be going for DEFCON or attacking threat? Well, let's have a look at the biggest DEFCON options in midfield. We've got Rice, Anderson, Garner, and Zubimendi. One thing that stands out here is the price. Besides Rice at 7.6 million, which in itself is still fairly cheap by midfielder standards, all the options fall around the 5.5 million range. However, we've now got a couple of great explosive options too, in the form of Sharda, who's slightly cheaper than Rice, and Dango, Dewsbury Hall, and Wilson, with comparable budget prices in the 5 to 6 million range to popular DEFCON options. So my suggestion, Rice is a perfectly acceptable sell, given that he won't be playing in Game Week 31 anyway, so he's a planned transfer out regardless between now and then, especially with options like Sharda now available, with better fixtures and higher upside. The advantage of Rice is that, for a DEFCON midfielder, his attacking numbers are also pretty solid, so the occasional attacking return is far more likely than with the likes of Anderson. I mean, I wouldn't be rushing to sell Rice, nor would I be taking a hit to do so, but when you have a free transfer available, go for it. As for the other DEFCON midfielders, it's entirely up to your risk preference. They're great long-term holds due to consistent points outputs, and somewhat fixture-proof, as they can reach the threshold in easy or hard games, and single clean sheet points aren't a primary concern, whereas explosive attackers benefit from streaks and good fixture runs, and could be valuable low-owned differentials if chasing, especially in short periods, such as Dango between now and Game Week 32. So it's up to you. Do you want a reliable 8th attacker who will get 4 or 5 points most games in the long run, great for solidifying rank, or do you want to take a punt on an explosive option in the next 4 or 5 game weeks who could outscore the DEFCON midfielders in that same run with just 1 or 2 hauls, but in doing so take on the risk of a poor run of form resulting in a sad string of 2-pointers? But with that all said, that wraps up my very first transfer plans. I'd love your feedback on whether you found this new style of upload helpful for your FPL team. Drop a comment with any final questions you need answering for your team in Game Week 27, and I'll respond with my thoughts before the deadline, possibly even in the Game Week 27 team selection. And if you enjoyed, a like and subscribe would go a huge way in supporting this new channel. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with my Game Week 27 team selection after Arsenal's final double game week fixture. Best of luck and fingers crossed for another green arrow.